I think we're live for episode 82 of Trek Live. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about the ninth iteration episode of Star Trek Discovery Season 2. How you doing this morning, Bill?
Doing good.
Good.
Really good. Happy to be here. Happy to
Yep.
talk about it. Yeah. How you doing?
Good. I'm good. I'm excited to talk about some Discovery.
Yeah, me too. Jonathan Frakes directed Discovery.
Yes.
No less.
Yep.
And actually, another big thing with this episode is that it's written by Michelle Paradise, who is the showrunner for season 3. So this is like our first taste of like the head writer moving forward. So
Yes. Do you have some
yeah.
notes on that?
Cool.
Yeah. Before we jump into that, how's your rewatch going?
My rewatch is paused
Okay.
at the break between TOS and the movies. We'll see if I get to. I think I will. Maybe watch the motion picture tonight. I love watching those movies at night, like when it's totally dark. I can turn it up. Like I treat them a little bit more like sacred than just an episode, I guess. So it's like finding the right time when I'm like free around. I have 2 straight hours to just dedicate at night when it's dark outside, especially for the motion picture because it's such a big movie. And yeah, so we'll see. I'm hoping tonight to do the motion picture and maybe the Rathacon too, and go from there. What about you?
Yeah.
What about your rewatch?
So the next episode that I'm gonna be moving on to is Dark Page, I think.
Okay.
It's a Troy episode, so kind of excited to jump into that. Yeah, it's just slowly progressing. I think that I'm moving a little bit more slowly because I know it's nearing the end. So I want to kind of let the episodes breathe. Right now I'm like an episode a week, which is fine. And I'm really enjoying it. So
that's good. Yeah, and you're kind of in the middle of a rare like 2-episode run of horror episodes.
Yes.
Phantasms, isn't that the last one?
Yeah.
That's definitely like a horror thriller kind of story, and Dark Page is definitely like a psychological, creepy thriller. So like Star Trek's obviously no stranger to those kinds of episodes, but 2 in a row is kind of unusual. What'd you think of Phantasms? The Troy cake and Crusher drinking out of Riker's head. Like, there's a lot of weird, bizarre imagery in that. I feel like it's a hot and cold kind of episode. So, what do you think?
I think it's warm.
It's warm.
Like you said, I think it's for me. It's a little bit middle of the road. It's interesting to me that there's, like you said, a lot of kind of weird imagery in there, and I like the thing that I like about the episode is it's exploring kind of more of Data's quest to be kind of human, and his sleep schedule and his dreaming, and I like that this has kind of been a common theme towards the end of the show, so they're not just writing that off.
Yeah, I agree. I think my favorite thing about it is that it kind of picks up the story arc from the Birthright 2-parter, where he's toying with the idea of dreaming and sleeping to become more human, and what dreams mean, and where they originate from, and what they say. And I kind of like that this doesn't allow that story thread to just kind of get dropped and be a one-off thing. I like a little continuity with that, and I think I agree with you. I'm not an anti person about Phantasms. I kind of like it, but I think a lot of it has to do with a lot of the imagery is just kind of like stapled into my head. Like I think as a kid, like walking into the room, being like 6 or 7 years old, and seeing Data cut into a cake of Deanna Troi and her yelling. Like, when you're 7 and you love Deanna Troi and you love Data, that's pretty creepy stuff that sticks with you. So there's a lot of seared memories about that episode that I think probably elevate it. Just because I think about it. But yeah, that's cool. Rob's in the chat. Welcome, Rob.
Welcome, Rob.
Let us know what you think of Phantasms. Is it a good episode? Is it a bad episode? Just out of curiosity, it's one that I'm always kind of interested to see where people fall on it. I feel like it's a love-hate kind of episode, like I said. But yeah, Project Daedalus.
Yes.
jumping right into the topic of the week.
Yes, heavy spoilers as usual, as per usual.
Yes, and as always, there's a lot of stuff to spoil if you haven't watched this episode yet. There's a lot of things happened. Some big things happened. So, overall impressions. What did you think?
I loved it. No spoiler there. I think one thing I noticed right off the bat, obviously the direction. Obviously, we can't not mention that. But it was very dramatic, and it was very simple. So those are kind of my early thoughts. But I loved it. What about you?
I loved it too. For a lot of the same reasons. I felt sort of that simplicity, kind of like a straightforward, single-minded kind of story. But there's a lot of really complex, complicated scenes within that single, straightforward story that this episode is telling. I'm going to hit on them as we kind of go through it, but there are like 3 or 4 scenes that really stand out to me as like headliners for like the season as a whole. But Rob's saying he really loved it too, and it was great to have an Airiam centric episode, which would be my first like more specific question. What did you think of the sort of introduction / development of Airiam as like a fully fledged sort of character? You know, she's been there since the beginning of being on the Discovery back in Context for Kings. She's been there the whole time, but certainly as like a background character. And in this one, we kind of learn a little more about her, what she is specifically, what she has to do to maintain herself, and kind of person she is. Like, what did you take away from the Airiam stuff? Which is kind of the back of the episode.
I loved how they set the character up in this episode. There was a lot of things that made you care about the character and made it more dramatic at the end, like we'll kind of talk about. Sure. But they did a great job with, you know, how she stores her memories, the picture, the sand, everything. It kind of built up her character and also the relationship with the crew. And I thought that was really strong.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think they did a really nice job of, and I've seen this kind of leveled against the episode by some folks that maybe it would have been nice to have some of those kinds of moments a few episodes ago, to not necessarily stuff all of Airiam's development into a single hour. And I would tend to kind of agree with that. In a perfect world, yeah, maybe you get a couple little moments in some previous episodes. But in fairness to the show, these previous episodes have been jam-packed as it is, and you know, random Airiam scenes and in the middle of like the Sound of Thunder or Light and Shadow probably wouldn't feel too at home. You know, like this is the natural place to kind of explore that with the story that they're telling in this hour. But yeah, I agree. I love sort of the clarification of who she is. She's evidently like a badly injured human who has been augmented, and I think there was like word of that even last season that you know, one of the producers said that she's not a robot, she's an augmented human, which, you know, has never been kind of confirmed on screen by any kind of legitimate dialogue or anything, but now it is. That you know, that opening shot of was it the opening shot or was it right after the main credits? I don't know. I think it was right after the main credits, but showing her like walking on the beach with her his fiance right before the accident happens that presumably kills the fiance and badly injures her to the point where she needs these sorts of cybernetic augmentations. I think development like that certainly goes a long way. It definitely gives the episode the emotional punch that it needs, given what they do at the end of the episode. And what I like the most about it is through that story and through those memories that you kind of see. I love the little glimpses of like Owushkin and Detmer and Tilly and Airiam just like sitting in the mess hall and just having a casual, lighthearted conversation about Kadiskat, like a Voyager reference. And it reminded me of scenes in Voyager, like in the mess hall, between characters kind of just sitting there having a casual moment and just kind of hanging out off duty. Or after their shift or on their lunch break or something. Like, I love that. That made the show feel more real, and it made it feel more Star Trek. Seeing the characters kind of with their hair down and just having fun. The Airiam stuff they were doing gave more opportunity for moments like that, and I appreciated that a lot.
Right. You mentioned Kadiskat. I love that they kind of interwove like games into this episode. Chess. Kadiskat, obviously, but also in like, the battle scene with the mines. It's
Yes.
a game.
Yes.
That was awesome. So
it is very awesome. I totally agree. And Rob echoed. He said it even before I said it. The scene with Tilly Detmer and Uushikin was so cool, and Kata Scott. Yeah, that's a cool deep cut reference to Voyager.
Yeah.
And who knows where that came from and who's responsible for that. But I know when they introduced Michelle Paradise as the showrunner, Alex Kurtzman said that she's got like encyclopedic Star Trek knowledge and she knows the whole thing. So, maybe that's a sign that she really knows her stuff.
Flexing her
and
Trek muscles, Trek knowledge muscles, yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, for a hardcore Voyager fan, Kata Scott, you know what that is, but for like the casual Star Trek fan, that's a pretty deep cut,
yes,
deep cut reference.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really cool to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I love what you just said about the game kind of weaving through the episode, because there are the one of the major scenes that really stands out to me is the Spock Burnham scene with the chess. And I will talk about that in a bit, but that's like a huge, that's a monumental scene as far as I'm concerned. Like, that's a huge moment for Discovery and a real highlight for the show, and certainly for this episode. And then, like you said, the battle scene I think is also really, really cool, and having to use like random tactical maneuvers, evasive maneuvers to be unpredictable. I love all that, and definitely did kind of feel like a game. Rob says, cool seeing that Commander Nhan, again, with her scant, like the skirt, TOS style, and when Arian rips off the device, it shows that allows her to breathe out air. Yeah, like that, the confirmation that Nhan is a Barzan from a deep cut TNG episode, The Price, is another one. I think we all kind of, people who remember The Price kind of assume that's who she was, because the obvious technology piece on her face is very reminiscent of that, but seeing that like confirmed on screen was also definitely really cool.
Yes.
I don't know. What do you want to talk about first, beyond kind of the Arium? Like, we'll get to the Arium end stuff, like the way that the story plays out, and the big sort of finale, the fight scene, and how it all plays out. I maybe push that a little further down the line. What scenes, what moments really stood out to you in this episode? Are there highlight?
I really want to talk about the chess scene that you just mentioned, because I think it's a big moment, like you said. So I think we need to jump into it and dive into it. So
yeah, I think it reveals a lot about where Spock is as a person now, not even just in the context of this crisis. His sort of lack of direction, not knowing what to embrace, logic, emotion, nothing's helping him figure this out. But just him as a person at this point in his life, like how he views his family and how he views Burnham, like that really kind of revealed a lot of meaty stuff that I think is kind of the backbone of what Discovery is, with this adding context to existing story, and while building its own thing as well, of course. But the dialogue in that scene is very rich, really deep. I think the performances from Sonequa Martin Green, who continues to blow me away every week, and I think this might be one of her better performances of the show. I think she's got moments in this where she just is killer, extremely good. Particularly, like I really want to cite her little moment after Spock leaves in that scene. And she's just kind of like, the look on her face, and when the bridge calls her, like her having to like collect herself, and
you can hear
like, take
her
breath.
Voice, and
yes,
it's everything. Yeah,
she's so freaking good. Like I am completely on board with Sonequa Martin Green, and could not be more of a fan of her performance. But is also really, really good, and has completely sold me as a younger version and a more emotional version of Spock that lines up with Spock that we saw in The Cage, and even Where No Man Has Gone Before. It really reminded me of Spock and Kirk playing chess at the very, very beginning of Where No Man Has Gone Before, and Spock kind of being kind of arrogant and a little emotional, and thinking he's 3 steps ahead of Kirk when he's really not. I think there's like a weird connection there that kind of makes sense and works. But seeing Burnham come out of like to begin that scene with going to get the chessboard and bring it out, the 3D chessboard from TOS, I think kind of knew right away that it was probably going to be a good scene, because it's such a classic throwback to iconic Star Trek stuff.
Yeah, I love that scene because we're seeing the progression. We're not seeing the next episode he's the Spock that we know and love. It's a progression, and it's going to take time. It's going to take work to kind of work through this, and their relationship is complicated. You could definitely see that. Yeah, and then I have to echo the performances. I was definitely blown away. Both of them were killer, I think.
Yeah, Sonequa Martin Green, I think I've kind of come to expect that she's great, and I've loved her kind of since day. Somebody who's really conversational, so we don't get to see a whole lot of his performance there, and we get a little bit of it if memory serves. He kind of is coming out of it and has some really good scenes in that. But in this episode, he really gets an opportunity to breathe and really flex his muscles a little bit. And I think he really shows up and is extraordinarily good in a surprising way. I had a lot of confidence and I had a lot of hope that he was going to be good, but he's kind of gone beyond even my best expectations of his performance.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure.
And I couldn't agree more with you that the best thing about this scene is that it kind of walks the line between moving this situation forward and not being repetitive. They're not going over the same ground they were, and if memory serves, when they're kind of bickering a little bit about their history and talking about where they've been and what's going on with them. It kind of covers new ground and it moves the story forward without resolving anything. It's not frustratingly melodramatic. It's not just kicking the can down the road. It's organically moving that relationship forward and setting the tone for what's coming, while still giving us a little bit more information, a little bit more context. That's satisfying. I think that's why the scene's so good. It promises more to come, more context and more resolution that needs to happen, but it's revealing more interesting stuff. It's not just treading, familiar ground and hitting all the familiar notes that we've seen already. So definitely a really well written, well performed, well directed scene. Just all around really well done and a highlight of this episode and of the show, I would say. Yeah.
Yes.
Any other scenes that you particularly kind of want to really?
Yeah, I'll kind of jump into one other scene that I have in my notes. It's the mine scene, and I think to kind of start this conversations off, there's action sequences and then there's action sequences, and I think there's a little bit of a difference, and I think I like this, how they kind of handled it, and not just action scenes for action scenes, like not like insert action scenes here. This was part of the story. This was not just inserted just to, throw in the trailer. It was part of the story, and that's why I loved it.
Yeah, I agree. It's innovative. It's different. It calls for the crew to think on their feet and do different things, and it calls for them all to be in their roles and do their jobs well.
Yep.
And it does feel it's a natural part of the story. And I think that's a sort of a trap that I would say Star Trek kind of falls into sometimes. I think you called it the insert action scene here. Some of the movies have that happen. Some Discovery episodes, some Voyager episodes, some Enterprise episodes.
Yes.
Like it's something that
all over track you can maybe nitpick or fairly criticize, however you want to define it. The desire to sort of insert an action scene that it's kind of easy to just sort of tune out because you've seen it before, you know what it's there to do. It's just kind of, you're going through the motions. It's same old, and sometimes it's like that, and sometimes it's not. And I would say this one is definitely not, because it's different and it's something that they need to do to move the story forward in a really natural way. I loved the solution, like you had kind of talked about earlier, that to think of it like a game, and you're playing the computer, and you have to be unpredictable, and you can't do the same old. You can't do what's expected, or the computer's going to know. And the idea to kind of go around the horn and have each different crewman randomly come up with a evasive maneuver to be unpredictable is a really creative, really cool way to do it. And for a show that gets knocked a lot by its critics and people who are, maybe just a little less red hot on the show, that the supporting characters don't have enough to do, they want to see more from the bridge crew, like little things like this go a long way. It shows that they're all like capable, good officers who have a role in the ship, that are, they're professional, they're real people, they have experiences, and that sort of solution plays to that and goes a long way. Like I said, I think that was great, and a really creative, inventive
way to execute an action scene. And I give a lot of that credit to Michelle Paradise as the writer, and coming up conceptually with a new way to do an action scene, and not just, fire phasers, shields down to 32%, evasive maneuvers, blah blah blah. The same old stuff. It's really refreshing, and I think Frakes directed it really well. It's not too frantic with the camera work. Like, I think a lot of people have also knocked episodes in recent weeks for being a little too in love with camera movement and flashy lighting and over the top stuff. I think that Frakes does just enough of that to make it exciting and make it fresh and new and modern, but not drawing attention to it at the same time. Yeah.
Totally agree. Yeah. Do you have any other kind of moments that kind of stood out to you? Besides maybe the ending or
Yeah, the one that I kind of pointed out on Twitter was the scene between Spock and Stamets, which was another kind of really refreshing moment. It's kind of a little side scene. It's not necessarily playing into the greater story of the episode. It is in some ways. It's cracking Spock a little bit and his perception of Burnham, and I think it kind of opens up his mind to why him and all that. But it also moves Stamets' story forward a little bit and gives him added perspective, and it reveals a lot about these two characters who are kind of similar in some ways. They're very sort of they can be pretty cold, they can be pretty no nonsense, they can be pretty unemotional and remote, and seeing them give like emotional advice to each other and sort of counseling each other, it was pretty cool and felt real and natural, and it was a nice little breather scene. It was really a highlight to me. Another one, kind of like the Spock Burnham scene. It really felt like a season great, like one of the better scenes of the season.
Yeah, I agree. I think this this episode just kind of supports my theory that this might be seem a little bit out there, but this episode felt very Vulcan to me. It felt very simple and kind of straightforward and calm, but under the surface and these little moments, you can tell that there was some great emotion and great dramatic scenes between a bunch of different characters. So
I agree with that. The scenes that really work and that kind of power this episode are really emotional at their core. And they're about like emotion bubbling underneath the surface. It's a really good analogy. It is very Vulcan.
And it's so simple the way that the scene is set up. It's two people in a crew quarters or in the the mess hall. Just so simple that makes for very powerful scenes. And I think that the writing obviously, but I think that the direction too. I think a lot of people think of directors, the camera movements, the shots, but he or she is also directing the actors and helping the scene kind of develop. So it's not just the camera work. I know we focus on that a lot. It's also, it's a seasoned actor directing these obviously very talented actors. So I think it all kind of culminated into what we saw. So
yeah, Frakes is the man, obviously, and he should direct as many episodes as possible. His episodes are pretty successfully. His episodes successfully capture that Star Trek feel, like that. They definitely have that. There's just a touch or something that he's somehow capable of bringing to the table. I naturally already love him, but he's batting 1,000 so far with his episodes. Another little element that I think I would have to point out is I might be. This is probably, I don't know, maybe it's not that big of a statement because there's not that many really cool ones or really good ones. But I think Admiral Cornwell is the best admiral ever in Star Trek. I think she's an awesome character and she brings a lot to the table. I love the fact that she's like a psychiatrist, and one of my other favorite scenes is in the teaser when she's kind of interrogating Spock, asking questions, and she's using like this technology that sort of measures, are you being truthful or not? It's like polygraph testing. and that actually I really like too, because there's things in TOS that kind of imply that sort of technology being used. They're like in a much more silly 60s kind of way, but that's definitely what they're doing. They're using domestic polygraph tests, basically. They're determining if somebody's being truthful or not. And I love the way that this brought that back. And as a psychiatrist, as an admiral, it makes perfect sense that she would use something like that and feel comfortable using something like that. That would be at her disposal. So I love that character. She's got gravitas. She's credible as like the highest ranking person in the room, but she's not arrogant and stuck up like some Starfleet admirals can seem in other episodes. She's not a bad admiral, and I love that. You know, I don't think that's such a huge statement, because there's not many like recurring admirals that you kind of really get to know over Star Trek's history, and certainly not to the level that we've kind of gotten to know.
I think I love Cornwell as well. I think she is the anti-Section 31, and the anti-Section 31 is Starfleet, and an admiral's job is to represent Starfleet, and I think she does that, and she's awesome. And I think she's so the opposite of, she comes in, uses this technology like Section 31 was going to do, but not in a harming way, and I think she's an awesome character.
She is. And another really, it didn't even occur to me until you were just kind of talking about that. Quick little moment between Pike and Cornwell, where Pike's going off about why'd you keep me away from the war and all this on the bridge, and she says you're the best of Starfleet, and you're demonstrating that now. Like, that is great, That is great. That is great stuff. And I love the way Pike reacts to that. I love the way Cornwell delivers that line. I love seeing the crew react to it, and the crew like knows it's true. It's just that's powerful stuff for Star Trek, and I think it's so powerful because 9 episodes in, we see how Pike operates, and we see in contrast to like what Lorca was, and how Lorca operated as a little bit more of a on the fringes, even when he was trying to be good or trying to fake being good character. You know, seeing Pike, he is like the quintessential, you know, Star Trek captain. Like he's the poster child. He's the cardboard cutout, but not in a bad way. Just like, if you're going to cut out like this is the perfect Star Trek captain, it's Pike. He does it all right. He's not perfect. He doesn't always make the right choice, and you can question some of his choices, but he always does it like for good reasons. His heart's always in the right place, and he's an outstanding leader. And as I think, I love the cutaways to the crew kind of reacting to that exchange, because I think we're one of the crew. Like, we're right there with them. We're new to Pike, along with them. We've been with them for these 9 episodes, and you know, we know it as well as they do that that's 100% true and makes perfect sense. And I love that's a thread that's been playing out kind of subtly in the background since Brother. It kind of gets brought out every so often, where Pike's kind of struggling with why was, you know, not being involved in the war was, you know, weighed on his crew and weighed on him. And I love that there was a little payoff to that. Great moment.
Yes, very great.
And that's what this episode is full of, like these great moments, these great scenes that really bring, like you said, that emotional punch.
Yes.
Yeah. Good stuff. What? I guess we should just talk about like that last 15 minutes or so when they go to the Airiam stuff on the station. Burnham, Airiam, and Nan on the landing party. I saw somebody point this out, and I have to echo it. Like, all the 3 people who beam over into this tactical situation they're all women, and I didn't even notice. Like, somebody pointed it out on Twitter. It doesn't even notice. Doesn't matter, and that's awesome. Like, the fact that they don't draw attention to it, it's just a natural thing. Does not matter at all, and that's good. Yes. that's well done.
That's the way it should be.
That's the way it should be.
Yes.
Really, really well done. But yeah, how'd you feel about all that? How it played out? The kind of reveal of what's been happening with Control and Section 31. This Vulcan admiral who, you know, I guess Cornwell thought was behind the whole thing. Turns out has been dead for a while, and Control seems to be pulling the strings as like the artificial AI. And like, how do you feel about where that story's going, and more specifically, I guess, I guess we'll talk about the Arium ending as well. But I guess more broadly first, like how do you feel about this kind of reveal that Control seems to be behind sort of everything at this point?
I think it's working for me. I think it feels new, and it feels like an actual threat. But it's something that we've seen in Star Trek before. We've seen, AI, whether it be anything, any form of AI, holographic, threaten everything. So it feels like a classic Star Trek, but also a new spin on it with different, aspects to it. But I think it's working for me. I think that I like that there were aspects that the audience knew, but the characters, they didn't know. We knew Arium was bad and compromised. So that kept us on pins and needles, like, what's going to happen. The mystery was still there. So I think it definitely worked for me.
Yeah, I agree. I like the direction of the story because I think it's apt. I think in true Star Trek fashion, it's sort of timely, and I think it's easy to lean on artificial intelligence and statistics and numbers and take away the human element in making these big decisions. I think moving forward, it's going to become more and more of a temptation for society to do that as we continue to automate more and more stuff. So it seems like this is going to be a foreboding, wagging your finger, watch out, be careful what you don't, be careful what you're doing, kind of Star Trek story. These things can lead to trouble. It seems like sort of like the Cylons, I guess, in Battlestar Galactica, leaning too heavily into artificial intelligence is going to bite you. Yeah. And I think that's apt. Like I said, I think that's true in Star Trek fashion. Like you said, Star Trek sort of treaded on that territory before, certainly with things like, talk of holographic rights and data. They've definitely talked a lot about artificial intelligence, but specifically there's an episode of TOS called The Ultimate Computer, where this computer scientist, Richard Daystrom, wants to, he's creating this ultimate computer that can run a ship pretty much automatically, and it's going to take away the human element. And Kirk, of course, is this is crazy, and is very much skeptical of that idea, and it certainly plays out to be true. Yeah, I mean, I think that episode holds up really well because just as apt now as it was in 1968, and this story seems to be going down the same path. So I like the way that's going, and I didn't expect that. I mean, it's a story that is a pleasant surprise. I think we all kind of had some ideas about where this was all going to go with the little tea leaves that we had early in the season, before the season started, with knowing Seven Signals, Spock's involved, Pike, Talosians might be involved at some point. There were a lot of little things that we kind of knew were coming, even last season with the Mirror Universe, and all these little hints ended up kind of playing out. In this, if you go back even a few weeks ago, I don't think anybody had any idea there was going to be an element of this sort of story coming. So I appreciate that it's been an unexpected turn that the story's kind of taken, and it seems like it's going in a direction that nobody saw coming, which is refreshing.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at last season, everyone was worried about the Klingons being too heavily involved. And again, we took a turn, like you said. So that's similar. Is it going to be too heavy with the Red Angel? No, it's there, obviously.
Sure.
But we're taking a turn, and I'm just curious to see how the season progresses.
How it all wraps up. Yeah. How it all sort of links up. It's sort of coming together, it seems like.
Yeah.
They seem to be kind of leading us to think that this Control, in one potential timeline, is going to, grow in stature and become
that squid thing.
Yeah, it's going to evolve into that, and it's going to wipe out all sentient life in the galaxy.
Yes.
And it seems like it's one of those. And this is where I think more context in the coming episodes is going to maybe clarify some of these things. But it all sort of is one of those things Janeway wanted to blow her brains out about, these temporal causality loop things, like Discovery running into this giant sphere that's dying and wants to impart all this information. Is that causing some of this to happen, or what? There's a lot of questions that I just how logically it's all sort of playing out. What was part of the original timeline and what's being changed, and we talked about that last week too. You know, it's sort of impossible to figure out. But I'm along for the ride, and I want to see it naturally and see how it all kind of wraps up. But I'm also grateful for the fact that we're getting up to episode 10, and we're not completely in the dark. Like, we're kind of slowly piecing it together and kind of seeing what's all going on and who's what, and you know. And I think that's good. It's making me confident that it's not going to be a rushed ending. It's not going to be like we're going to pull the rug out in episode 13 or 14 and wrap it up real quick, because they're slowly kind of revealing the moving parts and putting things into place early enough where I think, hopefully, if they do a nice job executing it, it'll feel natural and real and organic, and it won't be all rushed. And, you know, yeah.
Right.
So I'm confident so far. How'd you feel about Ariam's ending and how that played out?
Oh, jeez. I think the emotional punch really worked for me. You guys know I'm like a super emotional guy. And I'm going to get personal here for a minute, just because you guys know the drill. This is what Trek Live is. It's unedited. It's real. It's uncut. So you guys know I made a big move, obviously, and I had to leave some friends behind just for a little bit. So it really worked for me. It really kind of hit close to home with, you know, the friendships and all that. So the emotional punch really worked for me. Definitely teared up. I've teared up in Trek before. Obviously, it's nothing new, but it definitely worked for me. It hit home. I think it was a really strong emotional punch that is definitely gonna, you know, stick with me and remember this episode. So wrapping it up
with you on like a personal level, and the friendship element of it, I think that tells you like that the writing really, and that they really built it up naturally and really, really well throughout the episode. At the beginning of the episode, when you see her storing her memories and saving little things like just Burnham looking at her and sitting at a mess hall table and just having lunch, you know, like that, those kinds of things sell the fact that these are friendships, and that this is the stuff that means something to her, and this is what makes her who she is. And it does hit home. It's emotional. When the episode ended, I just did not see like that level of intensity and that level of emotion coming. I just had no idea. I suspected that there was something. There was something about the trailer for this week's episode that led me to believe that maybe that they were hiding stuff. Like, it was such a narrow trailer. It felt like they showed so little of it. It focused really heavily on like Burnham fighting Ariam and just flying up to Section 31. Like, it led me to believe that, you know, there had to be more to it, and that maybe they were hiding something to surprise, and that certainly came true, because I did not expect to be hit with a haymaker emotionally with this episode. But yeah, there's something just classic about you know, having that face to face, like you gotta shoot me out into space. Like, that's just brutal stuff, and they really built it up well. And all the punches landed, I think, emotionally, with the scenario and how they got to that position dramatically. And I think Nan being the one, like, they kind of cut to Nan being the one who, but Burnham didn't even do it. I think that says a lot too. Burnham couldn't, you know, eject her, like, because I remember, like, isn't there a shot where Nan, she gets blown out and Burnham is kind of like looking, she has like a surprised look on her face, and then it cuts over to Nan, like, leaning up and hitting the button. That, I felt like that worked, and that was true. That just felt real to me. That the security officer is the one who came over and was able to do that, not Burnham.
It felt kind of like Star Trek 2, in that kind of way.
Separated by glass and having a moment before you have to do
Also, Sonequa Martin Green's performance, like, she was like shooting she wanted to. You could feel the emotion. Like, give me a minute, you know. It was a really strong and powerful moment that put the cherry on top of a great episode, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I cannot emphasize enough that Sonequa Martin Green is spectacular. She is the heart and soul of the show. I think there are people out there who like her, don't like the character, don't like
Commander
performance.
Foley,
As far as they are crazy people to me, as far as I'm concerned. Like I hear what they're saying, but she's the heart and soul for me, and she gets me all the time. And I think this episode might have been one of her 2 or 3 best performances so far.
Yeah.
Like the scene with Spock in the quarters with the chess game, and then all the stuff with Airiam at the end are just killer stuff. I also love, by the way, kind of a side thing, just to kind of double back a little bit. I love that. I love the solution with like Saru figuring out that the Admiral was a hologram. Like there was just something about that, like the little subtle cut to like in the middle of the Admiral talking, Saru, like you see Saru's face, like kind of like something's not right here. Yeah, like that brought back memories of like in the original series, there were things like Spock would do that. Like they would cut to Spock, and you could just tell like his gears are turning. He's like something fishy. Like there's something off here, and that just felt so Star Trek to me. Yeah, I love that too. I love the way Saru's used in this episode, and I love the way that they telegraph when Burnham comes onto the bridge after her big scene with Spock. This emotional like moment that Saru can tell that Burnham is, upset.
Yeah.
By the same way he can tell that Patel, the Admiral's not real, because all the noticeable signs that would tell you this person's like getting riled up and is emotional are not there. That was really well done.
Yep.
Really nice use of Saru in an episode that doesn't focus on Saru at all. Like he still gets cool little things to do and is an important part of the story. Yeah. Same as Stamets. Same thing with Stamets. It's not his story. He's not a big part of it, but
he has something to do.
He has something to do, and so does Tilly. Like it really uses the, like Tilly's got an emotional component to this as well, like with her connection with Airiam that's established early on in the episode and is very heavily featured in like memory stuff, and she's the one that figures it out. It just does a really good job of using the cast, and I love Nan too. Like on the bridge is like kind of slowly piecing together something's not right with Airiam. I love that they kind of show her like sneaking up and kind of watching. Like she's that goes to show she's a good security officer. Like she knows what's up.
Exactly, because I feel like we've seen security officers that just
are clueless.
Yeah, clueless and don't even.
Yeah.
So it's like nice to be like, oh, you are a security officer. You're not.
Right. Yep. Yeah. One of my favorite like little gifs on Twitter. I think I sent it to you once. Is the stupid episode Rascals in TNG where the Ferengi beam onto the ship and take over.
Yeah.
And Worf shoots a phaser at the Ferengi and he just dodges it and he gets.
Yeah.
Like, I love Worf and I love TNG, but this is like the opposite of that.
Yeah.
Security officer on the bridge, like fully aware of what's going on around her, and can know that there's something's not quite right here.
Yep.
And that was really refreshing, and it speaks a lot to Nan's capability as a security officer.
Yep.
Yeah, and when she does what she does at the end of the episode, that says a lot too. That she's, she pulls herself up and takes care of business when she needs to.
Yep.
I think she kind of senses that Burnham's not going to hit that button. And she does. So. All in all, I think it's a great episode. I think Discovery's sitting on all cylinders right now. These last 2 or 3, I think, have been really on point. Do you have any other like more specific thoughts before I start asking you more general, larger picture questions about where this episode fits in and things like that?
I don't think so. I love the little visuals in this episode. The Discovery getting chewed up, and the kind of design and the architecture of Section 31 headquarters. It's very mysterious, and the way everything's set up with the mines, it feels very Section 31. And I guess
there was definitely
as we talk, if there's anything, I'll definitely bring that up.
Cool. You kind of made me think of this. There's definitely some kind of cool like Star Trek 2 throwback with the station kind of looks like Regula 1 in Star Trek 2, that space station, and seeing crew like hanging upside down in the space station, dead, like Star Trek 2.
Yeah, the frozen blood, or the blood and the gravity.
Yeah, really cool, really cool. I love that there's an Andorian in there. Like I just love that it's not just 4 humans. It's aliens, and makes the Federation feel like a bigger place and more natural.
Yep.
That's all really well done stuff.
Yeah.
I love the shot at the very beginning of the Discovery kind of life and going to warp right at the end of the teaser. Like just little like Starship porn stuff like that is good stuff.
I love Pike's tagline too. Oh man, whenever he says that, I get goosebumps. Like, yes, he's so cool.
He is cool.
Another thing I'll mention is the fight scene between Burnham and Airiam. So badass. That's so badass.
Yeah. It's really well done. It feels like it really feels real that every time Airiam makes contact on Burnham, that thing hurts like that. It really feels like the gravity of the situation is hardcore. Like it's it's really well done.
And when Airiam gets hit, she just like turns back, and it's it feels like it's cool.
Yeah, it's definitely really well done.
Yep.
So this episode I think is a real standout on every level. It's technical achievement and things like that. The fight scene, the visuals of Section 31, the visuals of the minefield battle, but also with the emotional stuff with characters. I think it's another one that kind of checks all the boxes, and it's not doing just one thing. It's very simple in its story, like you said. It's not kind of all over the place. It's not doing a lot of stuff, but it's checking all the boxes of what makes a great Star Trek episode: character, science fiction, cool visual stuff. It's got it all. Where do you think this one ranks? Like, I'm not expecting like a specific. Now we're 9 episodes in. It's not as easy as when there were 3 or 4 of them. But
Airiam's compromised. I'm emotionally compromised, so my numbers could be way off from yours. But I'm 2-3 right now.
Okay,
that's how high it is for me. Yeah,
I think it is for me too. Yeah. I think this is on the level with like New Eden and A Noble for Sharon and if memory serves. Like to me, they're the 4 that feel maybe a cut above. I don't know. I still kind of go back and forth on where they all kind of stack up, but it's in that conversation. So I'm right there with you. I think they're the ones that check the most boxes as far as the things it's accomplishing on a more episodic basis. I think this one and A Noble for Sharon have the most satisfying like emotional element.
Agreed.
I think they're the 2 that really nail that. But I don't. It's getting hard with 9 episodes, and they're all good, like doing a lot of stuff. So it's getting really difficult to kind of nail down where they fit. And I'm going to abstain for now, like giving it an official placement. But it's up there. It's a great one, and I think you can tell just by this 50-minute conversation or so that we're both pretty on board with this one. At this point, now that we're 9 episodes in. Where is this season a little better, significantly better, not as good as season 1 so far? What do you think about where it kind of stands?
Right now, again, emotionally compromised state. I'd say it's better. I think, is that necessarily a bad thing? No, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we've seen that it's no stranger to Trek that as series and seasons go on, it gets better. And I think that this is just falling right in line with everything else. So definitely. I would have to agree right now. I would say that yes, season 2 is better.
Yeah.
In an emotionally compromised state.
Fair enough. I agree with you. Right now, I would say season 2 is better than season 1, but it's no disrespect to season 1. There were nights this week, late last weekend. I was watching episodes of season 1, and I think it holds up really well. I loved it. Going back and watching those episodes again, I was curious, and part of the reason I did it was like now that we're kind of into season 2, and I'm like in that headspace and thinking a lot about those episodes and the tone of the show in this season. Like, how does season 1 hold up with that knowledge kind of in place? And I was pleasantly surprised at how much I still love season 1. I think I prefer season 2 for I think the overall tone of it just speaks more to me. It's a little less heavy. It's a little less doomsday-ish with the high stakes. There's certainly high stakes here, but I like the little bit more room to breathe and a little more levity that we're getting in season 2 as an overall thing. But season 1's got some great stuff. I watched Lethe again. I think that episode holds up really, really well. I think that's great Star Trek. I think Context is for Kings is still spectacular. It's a great hour of Star Trek. Yeah, and I think the pilot, I think the first 2 episodes with the Vulcan Hello and Battle of Pioneer Stars, I think they're really, really good. I love Benjo Georgiou, as the captain. I love seeing that crew in place and Burnham in that role with Saru. Like there are things in that I really love. I think there's some really heavily like expository dialogue that when you go back and you watch it over and over again, it kind of stands out a little bit more, like filling in gaps kind of through dialogue. Doesn't necessarily feel real natural, like especially in the Vulcan Hello. There's a lot of that, but it's great overall. Like it really does. I think a lot of the Klingon stuff really holds up. So I was kind of I just wanted to throw that out there as kind of like a self check I did at this point.
Yeah, totally agree. I'm excited to kind of maybe when the season 2 ends, restart everything, and see kind of how they compare and stuff like that. So, yep.
Cool. Yeah, I think we pretty much hit everything we need to hit with this episode specifically. Unless you have something else you want to throw out there.
Yeah, one more thing. Death and Track.
Absolutely. Yes.
I think it was good. I think that definitely didn't. It's tough pill to swallow. Obviously, losing a character like that. But I think they did it justice and did the character justice, and it wasn't out of left field like we've seen before or forced in any way. I think it felt natural. So
agreed. Yeah, I think so too. I think it's up there. I think it's better than some of the other examples that are out there. It did. I saw people talking about this. It did somewhat feel like Yar in Skin of Evil, just in the sense of like if you watch season 1 of TNG, like kind of did, especially in the second half of season 1, Yar is very much in the background. Like she doesn't have a lot to do. But in Skin of Evil, at the beginning, they kind of telegraph, okay, we're giving her a little more to do. She's got like just a little more natural dialogue. She's talking to Worf about like a martial arts competition on the ship. Like they're obviously humanizing her to make sure that there's a little bit more of it. Yeah, exactly. Yep. And this sort of feels like that as well. But I think this is even more successful because I think it, like I was talking about, I think it, I think the focus on her relationships with the crew not only benefits the series as a whole because it's telling us that the crew is becoming a family. They are, that there's friendships on the ship and they hang out and they do things together, but it also gives the Ariam ending more power because she's sacrificing her friendships and stuff. Yeah, she's not just a robot on the ship. Doesn't care about anybody. Like she's a human feelings under there, and she has feelings.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I think that was critical stuff to establish, and the show's better for it, and the character's better for it. So yeah, definitely up there. It was a successful character death.
Yeah, and I think that this episode adds to the character because I think it adds context. And when we watch season 1, we'll know. So I think it's all around great episode, obviously. So
yeah, totally agree.
Yep. Any final thoughts, or should we get into Star Trek content?
I think we should get into Star Trek content.
Okay. Star Trek content, I don't have any. Still backed up on a few things. I am caught up with Trek Ranks, so that's one thing that I'll mention. Just, because we do every week. And it was great. 2-parter, I guess, with ships and ships. So
yes,
I had a great time listening to that. So yeah. Did
you hear anything that you greatly disagreed with, or was there anything that like stood out to you as a?
I just have my number 1 is the same as your number 1 as far as ships as relationships.
Yeah.
Figured. So I definitely agree with that, but for the rest of the list, it's a little bit. It's definitely, you guys mentioned everyone that I would mention as far as, or every ship that I would mention. It's just a little bit different order. So
sure, yeah.
No, but it was a great episode.
Cool. It was a lot of fun to do, and yeah, I'm kind of curious to go back and maybe listen to the episode we did about relationships.
Oh yeah.
Just because I think I probably was pretty similar. I think I named everything that I would have named on that old episode of our show. But yeah, I didn't go back and like look at my old notes preparing for that episode when I did Trek Ranks. I tried to brick wall, think about it fresh, and I think I probably ended up about the same place.
Yeah.
I think I remember talking about Kirk and Keeler and Tom and B'Elanna.
Yeah.
Sisko and Cassidy Yates, I think I mentioned too. So yeah, glad you like that. And yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat though. I'm things. I did listen to a episode of Primitive Culture actually earlier in the week. There's an episode about Gothic fiction in Star Trek, and it kind of talks about like Janeway's holo novels and beginning of Voyager, like those which I was never a big fan of, like that early stuff. But that made the show interesting to listen to, hearing their perspective on it. So I would definitely recommend that. I love Primitive Culture. We've talked about the show a good bit on our show when we highlight other content, and definitely would recommend it. The show that I also, I guess, would kind of maybe highlight, because I think they're doing it soon, and I'm just kind of curious to hear what they say. There's a new podcast, newish. It's called Inglorious Treksperts. Have you heard anything about this one? No. I don't necessarily agree with everybody who's about more modern Star Trek. There's some toughies on there, but they're really knowledgeable Star Trek people, and they're doing a live show at some point. Like they're going to a convention or something, and they're going to record it live on a panel talking about Star Trek V on its 30th anniversary. And I'm always curious to hear what people say about Star Trek. It's such an outlier, and it's so beat up over the years that we've done episodes on it. We've talked about Star Trek V, and it's always an interesting conversation. So I'll be on the lookout for that.
Yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up for this week. We'll be back next week, obviously, to kind of cover this next week's current Discovery episode. The discussion doesn't have to stop here, though. Come over to Twitter, talking a lot about TNG movies, our Spill and I's summer plans, potentially. So, and Discord as well, and the Facebook page. You guys know the drill. We will be back next week, probably same time. So look forward to that.
Definitely looking forward to it. Thanks for watching.